This meeting of the Public Utility Commission of Texas will come to order to consider matters that have been duly posted with the Secretary of State for July 30th, 2026. Good morning, everyone. Commissioners, I'd advise that we take up the items in order today. We do have a closed session where we have to consult with our FERC attorney. So I'd ask that we see if anyone has shown up for public comment, take public comment, and then go into closed session to hear from our FERC attorney, then come out and finish the agenda if that's amenable for everyone. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. So Ron, will you please take us through the consent agenda, please?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. First, I'd like to note that Commissioner Yachtman filed a memo stating she's recused from item number 3. By individual ballot, the following contested case items were placed on your consent agenda. Items number 2, 4 through 10, 12, 13, and 18 through 21. Items from the rules and project section of your agenda were placed on your consent agenda for item numbers 23, 30 through 33, and 42.
Thank you, Ron. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as was just laid out.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right. Has anyone signed up for public comment this morning?
No, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Alex. All right. So commissioners, let's go ahead and move into closed session. So having convened in a duly noticed open meeting, the commission will now at 9:33 a.m. on July 30th, 2026, hold a closed session pursuant to Chapter 551 of the Texas Government Code. It will consult with its attorney pursuant to Section 551.071 of the Code, deliberate personnel matters pursuant to Section 551.074 of the Code, and deliberate security matters pursuant to Section 551.076 of the Code. We'll be back shortly. The closed session is hereby concluded at 9:56 a.m. on July 30th, 2026, and the commission will resume its public meeting. The commission will now take action on the following matter that was deliberated on during closed session. I'll entertain a motion to intervene in FERC docket ER 26-2806.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, so Ron, that'll take us then to item number 3. We lay out item number 3, please.
Chairman, item number 3 is docket number 56687. It's the application of CSWR Texas Utility Operation Company, LLC, and Patterson Water Supply, LLC, for sale, transfer, or merger of facilities and certificate rights in Denton, Cook, Jack, and Montague counties. As a reminder, Commissioner Yachtman is recused from this item, and Chairman Gleason filed a memo.
Thank you, Ron. So as the memo states, I'd approve the transaction, but different rates than were recommended in the PFD. I'd approve the rates from CSR, interim rates for CSR at the last base rate case rather than final rates. The rates recommended in the PFD were not in force or on file when the application was submitted. Interim rates were, and on notice, although notice of interim rates was not provided, final notice on rates was. I believe that the good cause exists under the Water Code to waive that notice requirement. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I believe the interim rates are appropriate as well, particularly since there was identified, during this docket, a significant need to do capital improvements. I mean, close to $1.5 million. So, and the good cause is, I think, appropriate as well.
I completely agree. The $1.5 million in capital costs, I think, necessitates that particular rate, and I agree with your thinking there.
With that, I will entertain a motion to adopt the proposal for decision in part and reject in part consistent with my memo.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Ron, will you lay out item number 11, please?
Item number 11 is docket number 58405. It's the application of Lone Star Transmission LLC to amend its certificate of convenience and necessity for the Phantom Hill to Tiger Solar 345 kV transmission line in Jones County. Chairman Gleason filed a memo.
Thank you, Ron. As stated in the memo, I'd adopt the PFD with modifications and approve the consensus route. I also think we need to grant NG's motion to withdraw from this proceeding. Happy to answer any questions.
I agree.
I agree with the consensus route and also appreciate you noting that we needed to add back in one of the, I guess, paragraphs that we typically put in these type of motions that deal with identification of the metallic pipelines.
I'm in agreement with your memo.
With that, I will entertain a motion to grant NG's motion to withdraw and adopt the PFD as modified by my memo.
So moved.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. That'll take us to item 15. Ron, will you lay out item 15, please?
Item 15 is docket number 59137. It's the application of El Paso Electric Company for approval of a system resiliency plan. Both Commissioner Yachtman and Commissioner Rohde filed memos.
All right. Commissioners, we'll have you lay out your memos. Commissioner Rohde, would you like to go first?
I would love to yield to Commissioner Yachtman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies
Okay. Well, thank you, El Paso, for filing the information requested. It was very helpful. I will just kind of go through the memo. I do add back in those projects that were for critical care customers, as I think that the benefit of those is definitely outweighs the cost, as we've done in other projects as well. I will make a note, and this is for all utilities that are filing information. When I go through and do some of the math, and again, I am not the expert in adding, but when I catch mistakes, it's little details that we need to pay attention to. So just make note of that we do dig in and look at the math sometimes. But other than that, I'm happy to answer questions on the projects I added back.
We dig in on the math all the time.
All the time. Dig math.
Questions?
Yep.
Okay.
No.
Commissioner Rohde?
Thank you very much. My memo is not intended to approve or disapprove El Paso Electric's system resiliency plan, but rather to emphasize the importance of 24/7 cybersecurity monitoring. As I note in the memo, FBI data shows cyber attacks tripling since 2018 to over 1 million reported attacks, causing $21 billion in harm in 2025 alone. Given the threat that cyber attacks pose, I want to stress the importance of having 24/7 manned operations along with software monitoring for our utilities. In my opinion, it is not enough to simply be warned about attacks, but also to be ready to respond quickly when threats or attacks arise. Therefore, I wanted to use this opportunity to share my view of the importance of a comprehensive and integrated cybersecurity program that includes having trained personnel always ready to respond if and when cyber threats arise to our utilities.
Appreciate that layout. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Rohde?
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your memo because I think part of what resiliency planning is really all about is managing the risk, and certainly identifying the risk is that first important step. And so I appreciate the time and also, the expertise that you bring to this because you did a lot in your previous world.
Thank you very much.
Totally agree. Appreciate both memos. With that, Commissioner Yachtman, would you like to make a motion?
Oh, sure. I move that we adopt the proposed order with modifications consistent with my memo.
Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Ron, will you add item 16, please?
Item 16 is docket number 59183. It's the application of Energy Transmission Texas LLC to amend its certificate of convenience and necessity for the Muleshoe to Lyra Solar and Lyra BESS 345 kV transmission lines in Borden County.
Thank you, Ron. So, as Ron said, we have a PFD in this case. I would reject the recommendation in the PFD and would remand this back to SOAH. It's a bit unusual. We don't have any dispute over routing, but WET proposed a design that involves the construction of 2 new parallel single circuit transmission lines to connect to generation. The PFD discusses how WET didn't provide quantitative evidence such as studies, models, or cost comparisons showing how this design compares to other alternatives. I think it's appropriate for us to get additional data on whether this design is actually necessary for service, for accommodation and convenience for the public safety. And so with that, and in addition to, the issues highlighted by staff, I think it's appropriate to send this back to SOAH. Happy to answer any questions or hear your thoughts.
I agree with the remand as well.
I'm in agreement as well.
I too agree.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to reject the proposal for decision and remand this proceeding to SOAH consistent with our discussion.
So moved.
I
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. All right, I believe that concludes the contested case portion of our agenda. So we will move now to rules and projects. First project I have is item number 28. That is project 56022, reports of the Texas Reliability Entity. Good morning. Joseph, it's been a while since we've seen you. Welcome back.
Chair. Is this, we on here? Okay. No, good morning. I really appreciate y'all having us here.
Just hold it a little closer. I think
Sorry.
the court report's
Good, just
Cool name.
yes. Joseph Younger. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Texas RE, and with me is David Penny, who's the Director of our Reliability Services group at Texas RE. So I just wanted to start by thanking y'all again for having us here. And I also wanted to start by thanking Commission staff. Over the last few years, we've worked with staff to really build a partnership, and either with working with Barksdale and Connie and doing quarterly meetings to talk about what's happening at that level, but also quarterly cybersecurity meetings with Chuck and his team, working with Olivia on the Black Start exercises and being able to observe and be involved in those important activities. So we've really developed a range of touch points, and that's been very important for our work, because one of the things that we've seen on the national level is there's a lot of attention being paid to what's happening here in Texas and all the innovative approaches that are going on to address the risks and the fundamental changes that we're all seeing across the continent to the electric grid. And so having those partnerships and that understanding and messaging really helps us spread awareness of what's happening here, as well as leverage all the innovation that's going on to inform those national discussions. So it's been a very important thing for us and really impactful. So I really want to appreciate the time staff spends with us and start with that. Just to kind of introduce our organization a bit, Texas RE's sole focus is on the reliability and security of the ERCOT grid. And we accomplish that in two fundamental ways. The first is through the risk-based enforcement of mandatory reliability and security standards. And those are in two large buckets. The first is the operations and planning standards, which run the gamut from modeling and planning all the way to individual resource performance, winterization, all those topics. The other main body of standards is cyber and physical security through our SIP standards, which is an important part of what we do. In addition to that work on the compliance side, we also collect and analyze a lot of data across the interconnection. And David's team is that's their primary role. They look at all this data and then use it either to inform reports that NERC generates to look at reliability issues on the continent scale, like the long-term reliability assessment or the state of reliability report. But also we produce two reports each year that are only done by Texas RE and are only looking at the ERCOT interconnection. The first is the assessment of reliability performance, which is a backward-looking report that looks at how the ERCOT grid is doing. And that's what David's going to talk about today. We published that in June and filed it in our project. And then the other report is our regional risk assessment, which will come out in the fall. And that's a forward-looking report that looks at what the risks are, what are emerging issues, and then steps that are being taken to mitigate those risks as well. So that's something that we'll have out in October, November, and then happy to come talk about that as well. So with that, I'll get out of the way and let David talk a little bit about the highlights from the assessment of reliability performance, and then we can take any questions you might have.
Perfect.
All right. And thank you for having us here again. My name is David Penny, Director of Reliability Services with Texas RE, and I think this is the third year being able to present to the commission, and it's very grateful for allowing us the time to do that. As Joseph described, our assessment of reliability performance, we've been putting out this product for, I think, 12 plus years now, 2014. It's definitely evolving over time as we try to make that product better to provide value, not only value to the stakeholders, but it also feeds into multiple programs and projects that we have within Texas RE, and I'll describe that a little bit later. So I guess to get started, if we look back at 2025 and the first half of 2026, from an operational perspective, things have actually been relatively quiet and calm. If you look back, because we've had no major events, no major storms, no hurricanes, thank goodness. It's been relatively calm. But even with that, there are certain, say, success stories. There's also challenges that we uncovered as we did our assessment. One of the first things to talk about as far as success stories is the cold weather performance. If you look back at 25, we had, and the first part of 26, we've had 3 major winter storms. Enzo in January 25, Kingston in February 25, and then most recently Fern. And through those 3 storms, the grid has performed very well. And I think that's a success story related to the ongoing implementation of ERCOT's weatherization inspection programs. But at the same time, we've also, the NERC standards related to cold weather weatherization have also become enforceable and implemented as well. So we are now collecting extreme cold weather temperature data from the entities as part of that NERC standard, as well as corrective action plans if they have a cold weather event, and also any cold weather constraints that may prevent them from operating during cold weather. So we have all that data at our disposal. With that being said, weatherization is still something we definitely need to keep our thumb on the scale. We cannot afford to get complacent around that. So it's, keeping these programs up and running is vital. The next success story, I think for 25 was the implementation of real-time co-optimization. As that program was, going through its process to get set up, we held bi-monthly meetings with ERCOT staff so that we could ask questions. They could keep us informed of what the process and steps were and testing they were doing, and we were able to ask questions and voice any concerns we had. It was a very worthwhile process. And since the implementation of RTC, at least the reliability metrics we've been trending have all shown either stable or positive performance, particularly in the area of frequency control and the deployment of ancillary services. So that has definitely worked out. On some of the concerns we're seeing from a reliability metrics, I guess let me back up a second. When we look at our reliability metrics, we trend those performances over multiple years. We try to look at a minimum of 5 years, but some of our data sets can go back 15 years plus. And so when we trend that data, we try to analyze it and do a statistical trend analysis on it to say if the trend is improving, if we're showing positive performance, if it's stable. It may be something we want to monitor if we have 1 or more bad years, or maybe something we classify as actionable if there's 2 or more consecutive years of declining trends. So when you use that analysis technique, 2 of the metrics that we look at fell into that actionable category, and both of those are tied at the hip to the large load integration issues. The first of those being the future reserve margins, and a lot of that has to do with the uncertainty of what's in the load interconnection queue and how we're going to handle that. I think this is one of those areas that, as Joseph described, that Texas is out front leading that. The batch zero process is hopefully going to give us some of that certainty we need around looking at the flow forecast methodology and what's going to get included in our load studies and so forth. So hopefully as that process played out, we'll start to address that issue. And we're way ahead of what the rest of the country is doing in those regards. The second metric on the large load side is the operational performance related to voltage ride-through issues. We've been sending, in ERCOT, we've been seeing those types of events as far back as 2022, well before the events that got the press in Data Center Alley happened. The commission is probably aware of a very large event that had occurred just last week in Data Center Alley. There was a 230 kV line fault that tripped off 3,000 plus megawatts of data center load in that area. That event was more than double the size of those previous events. So this is definitely not a problem, or this problem is not going to go away anytime soon. It's something we have to address. And again, this is one of those things where I think Texas is leading from the front with the recent approval of NOGA 282. We're getting some, hopefully some things that are going to fix and address those problems. A couple other metrics that fell into the monitoring category. One of them had to do with the forced outage rates, or what we call E4 on the conventional fleet, specifically with coal units. What we saw in the data was The year-over-year trend from 25 versus 24 on the coal fleet, the forced outage rate more than doubled from a historical average of about 12% up to about 25% in 2025. You have to do a deeper dive in the data to understand what's going on with that because the coal fleet is relatively small, about 20 units. And what we saw was there was very long extended outages on two specific units that drove that metric to what happened. One of those outages began in the late fall of 24, ran through the entire year of 2025, and finally was brought back to service in February 26. A second unit had an outage that began in April of 25, stayed out for the remainder of the year, and is still out today, almost another 15 consecutive months. So that's what drove that metric and what happened. That's why we want to continue to monitor that. A similar story on the transmission side. We saw some significant changes in the forced outage durations we see on the 345 kV system. Again, it was a similar story there. There was a 345 kV auto transformer that had a substantial failure and a fire in the late fall of 24, has remained out through the entire year of 2025 and still remains out almost 18 consecutive months now. That outage of the auto transformer and the line with it accounted for more than 70% of the total outage duration we saw on the 345 kV system. The reason I'm bringing this up is there's a common thread related to all those outages is you had, I guess, substantial equipment or catastrophic equipment failures, and where the restoration or recovery of that equipment was either extended or exacerbated by supply chain issues. And that's not unique to Texas. We saw this in the NERC-wide data as well across the country. There are other areas that are seeing the same thing. One other metric to mention is around what we're seeing in terms of inertia and renewable penetration. There's some interesting things going on. Inertia is typically a very slow moving trend because it's tied to the changes in the resource mix. And with the